So in the fall of 2020, Suncor conducted some community outreach just to listen to our neighbors, to understand concerns, learn more about what they want to know about Suncor. One of the things we heard was that air quality, understanding more about the air that the community's breathing was very important. So we decided to voluntarily stand up this community air monitoring network that measures ambient air quality in the community. So I'm going to let these guys go into the details. But it was important to us that we not only shared the data, but helped people understand what that means with respect to health and any impacts. And it was important that we did it in English and Spanish. So all of this information that you're going to hear about today is available on a website, a dashboard, and it is in English and Spanish because those are the primary languages of this community. So one other thing, we also knew that so it was also important to us that this program could be trusted by the community. So we actually have this third party of experts who run the program. So while Suncor supports the program and had it stood up, we have this team of scientists and experts who actually maintain, operate, and optimize the program for us. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys to talk a little bit about the program.
Sounds good.
And whatever you need me to do,
Yeah.
fan of light.
We just signed all the locations to the map.
Yeah.
Might refer to that.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
so
We'll pull it out.
okay, no problem. So again, my name is Austin Heitman. I'm with Montrose Air Quality. I can start us off here. I'll discuss a little bit about the technology that's used in the sensor network. So in the network that's deployed around the neighborhoods, around the refinery, and the public website. I'll hand it off to Steve to talk about the mobile band and the data that we're collecting, driving around the neighborhoods, and then he'll pass it off to Dr. Lumpkin to discuss what does all this data actually mean. So we kicked off this program just over a year ago. So August 16th of last year, we turned a public website online that shares data in near real time with anybody in the community. It's a publicly available website. The data that's flowing to that website is generated by a handful of different sensor technologies that we have deployed around them in the neighborhoods surrounding the refinery. So we have two primary smaller sensors. So these sensors are in a box about the size of a shoebox. They run off solar power. They communicate over cellular. Monitor for just over half a dozen compounds, including carbon monoxide, nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, so really fine particles in the air, classes of compounds like total VOCs, and hydrogen sulfide. And then we also collect meteorological data at all these stations. So we're collecting wind speed, wind direction, temperature, humidity, common meteorological parameters. The total VOC sensor doesn't respond to a specific compound. It responds to potentially thousands of different compounds. So there's no way for us to really understand what does an elevated reading of TVOCs really mean. So what we do is when we have a total VOC reading above 1 ppm, we actually trigger a system that collects a sample of the air into these stainless steel canisters, which then allows us to send that off to the lab for them to analyze for 60 plus different compounds that we've predetermined. All of the data that we're collecting on these sensors flows to the publicly available website that Brandy mentioned, ccnd-air.com. All of the sensor data, along with the SUMI canister and mobile monitoring data that we collect, we put reports together. We make those reports available on the public website, along with input from Dr. Lumpkin and his team on what does the data that we're collecting really mean. On the main dashboard of that website, we're providing a mapped overview of the area and all of the monitor locations. If you hover over those locations, it'll give you the most recent data that's been transmitted to the website, so that data is available in near real time. We also provide additional context about what do the values that we're seeing mean, and what are potential sources of these compounds. And then all of the data is available in a graphical format, and all historical data that we're collecting on the devices is available along with the reports. And there's additional information on the website, simple FAQ, so frequently asked questions that we receive for the program, along with what technology, more technical descriptions of the technology that's being used in the sensing devices. And then there's also a page for the community members that are using the website to provide feedback to us to help us improve the website and the program, and we're constantly checking that. So if you haven't checked out the website, I would highly recommend it. And if there's any feedback or anything that's confusing or anything that'd be more helpful, we're checking that every day, so it'd be really helpful to receive any feedback that you might have. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the sensor network, all the data that we're collecting in real time, and how that data is accessible. That, I'll hand it off to Dr. Yutz.
Could I ask a question first?
Yes,
How
please.
many monitors are there?
Good question. So there are currently 10 monitoring locations in the network, and they're all placed in within a 3-mile radius of the refinery. And most of the locations are at Denver public schools around the refinery, though some of them are at community centers like the Focus Point Community Center, and then there's some that are located on Suncor property, so just north of the refinery and at the refinery business center.
And if I could just add on to that, in May of 2021, we held a couple of public engagement sessions. They were via Zoom because this was when we were not doing things in person, but where we invited the public to come and give us feedback on where they wanted to see the locations of these monitors in the community. So they're based on that community feedback and access to the site, so they're, we have to be able to get to the monitoring stations, and as Austin mentioned, proximity to the refinery. And we should mention also that the compounds that are being measured are also commonly associated with refinery emissions, which is why those compounds were selected.
Right, and is this a map that we can look at later and see if there's one in my neighborhood?
Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are the closest ones to this park?
So this park in particular, there's actually one at Kearney Middle School, which is about 2 blocks north of this park. So there we have our smaller box sensors that the data streams to the public website. And we also have a larger system that has large solar panels that you can't miss if you drive over there. And those larger systems are considered higher grade instruments. They have built-in HVAC systems, which helps stabilize the readings that we're collecting from the units. So those are used as part of our quality assurance program. So if you drive over there and you see this big solar panel array, that's our system.
Okay.
That's it, one?
Around this park.
Yeah, the only reason is the invitation to this told me that there were 2 in close proximity, so that's why I asked.
The next closest would be Rose Hill Elementary. I believe that would be probably the next closest. There's one at Central Elementary, which is nearby here, and then Adams City High School, which is a little bit northeast of here.
High school?
Yeah. Adams
Trudy,
City
when you
High
take a
School.
look at this map later, you'll see Pioneer Park, and there are 3 stations in the Pioneer Park neighborhood area.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
yeah, you can come over after and
High school, I went to closest to you.
I know. You too? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Oh,
it's
no,
great.
please. Yeah.
So Austin's area is mainly on these stationary sensors, and those provide a nice overview, but they're located in one specific area. To broaden the program and make it a little more accessible for everyone, we moved to mobile monitoring. So a lot of people want to know what's in my neighborhood and what's in my house, where I So we take the van and we traverse up and down the streets at about 5 to 10 miles an hour. And we're monitoring every second for a data point. We're looking at all the compounds that are analyzed for in the laboratory grab samples that are sent away from stationary sources. You see, depending on wind patterns and time of day, you see different concentrations. So the stationary systems depend on the wind carrying them to the station, whereas we go to where the actual measurements are taken. So if you can see, kind of on the map, the little colored squiggly lines around are the neighborhoods, 6 neighborhood areas that we actually traverse with the van up and down. It takes about 5 days to do that. And then, like I said, the data is collected every second. So we're analyzing for these 60 plus compounds every second. And then we take all of this data along with the metadata that I collect as well. And that's sent over to CTH and Dr. Lumpkin for the health analysis. We do have the van. That is the actual van that we use. And after we're done, I'll be more than happy to show anyone inside what it looks like. It's kind of our state-of-the-art flagship for ambient monitoring. There are currently 2 of these instruments in the country. One is located in a laboratory in Wyoming, and this is the one that's actually out performing measurements. It's a sophisticated research-grade instrument that was quite expensive, but it gives us the resolution and the detection limit that we need for ambient measurements. Your concentrations aren't high, but in order to measure them, so if they're not high, you have to have a more sophisticated and detailed instrument. So we brought this in, and it sees in the part per trillion, part per quadrillion levels, which was significantly lower than what other mobile instruments may do.
So do you know percentage-wise how accurate this thing is? Since it's so new and there's only 2?
Oh, no, the technology has been around for decades. We have a quality assurance program built into the monitoring system, and when you come in, you will see I have about 10 cylinders inside that actually contain certified concentrations of the components we're looking for. And I calibrate the instrument every morning and every afternoon when we're done to make sure that it hasn't drifted. And the tolerance is plus or minus 20% of 1 part per billion. So
Plus or minus.
yeah,
This is what I wanted.
yeah, plus or minus 20% of 1 billion, of 1 part per billion.
I guess I'm kind of new to all this. So how do you separate cars and diesels and other exhausts from Suncor's exhaust?
You can't.
So Suncor could be at 0 and the rest of us could be destroying the planet. Because I like Suncor. I'm on Suncor's side. Just to let everybody know.
I don't think there's a side because it's the way that, and I don't live here, so I don't know any of the history, but
They pay us a lot of money to be here.
I will say that overall, from testing around the country in a multitude of locations, this area has one of the cleanest background levels of compounds that I've tested for. For some of them, I can't see them. It's below the detection limit of this instrument.
Sorry about the jargon, but I don't understand cleanest background what?
There's, no matter where you are, there's always, these compounds are always there. And we've taken this instrument out 30 miles outside of town. We went way out into the flats.
Out into Aurora.
Yeah, and we'll even pass that on to where it's mainly just farmland or flatland, whatever it is. And we did a lot of detailed studies to see how low it actually is, these levels of compounds. And your benzene level, which always seems to be one of the stalwarts that everyone's worried about, outside of town was around 120 parts per trillion, which is significantly lower than, and what I live in Houston, so we have a lot of industry there, and our background is about 450 parts per trillion benzene. But
And
when
what are you
actually-
finding in Commerce City?
Last time it was, do you have the one that has the benzene graph on it? Mike, you might know of.
Yep, it's,
I think I brought it.
here we go.
This gives me a basis for comparison.
Sure. This is a chart that we use called a thermometer graph, and it's just for the chemical benzene. And so what I do is talk to people about this is the level of benzene that would be immediately adverse to your health. It would make you woozy. It could make some people pass out. 50,000 parts per billion. And as you go down lower and lower, you get to, this is the level that you can actually smell, the odor threshold, about 12,000 parts per billion. These lower numbers are the numbers that are from toxicology studies and human health studies that we came up with what is our safe level going to be. And those safe levels are 9 parts per billion for up to a 2-week constant exposure, and for long term, 6 months, a year, or even a lifetime of exposure, the safe level is 3. What we have seen on average with the van is 0.2. So that's 15 times lower than the safe level.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just one comment on your question about how do we know where what the sources are of the compounds. I just want to share with you the ways that Suncor monitors air in the community. So this program is just one way that we're monitoring the ambient air in the community, right? But we actually have lots of monitoring at the refinery, starting with, and Brian or Baron, you guys feel free to jump in here. But these continuous emissions monitoring systems, or CEMS, are tools that we have to measure what is coming out actually at the top of the stack or at emissions points throughout the refinery. There's 15 of them, I believe.
15 SEM systems monitoring a variety of pollutants, right, from various stacks at the refinery. Right.
So that's one way we know exactly what's coming out, from the refinery. We're in the process of standing up we currently are monitoring for benzene at the fence line of the refinery, and we are in the process of standing up a more robust fence line monitoring program that is a result of House Bill 1189 that was passed last year that requires us to stand that up. And we just heard from the state recently what we have to do to complete that plan, but it's going to measure for
hydrogen cyanide, hydrogen sulfide, benzene, and the state would like us to monitor for a whole variety of other compounds.
And that information will also be made available to the public, as will the SIMS monitoring information at some point down the road. So that's kind of the path that we're seeing with the state regulatory environment, is more transparency, sharing this data with the community in a way that they can understand. So in addition to the SIMS monitoring, the fence line monitoring, these community monitors are a part of this program. The van is part of this program. And then in certain situations, our little guy's not on here, but in certain situations, we will send Suncor personnel out into the community with handheld monitors to monitor for certain compounds. And that's usually if there's some sort of event or issue that we know is happening at the refinery, we can also measure that way. So we have a very broad commitment to monitoring and sharing information.
Can I add one thing? So for cars, the state air pollution control division, they have vehicle miles traveled, so they could model how much they think a benzene level came from the cars that go through. So we have vehicle mile travel for 270 and 470 and most of the roads around here.
All right. Any more, Steve? All right. Brandy, let me grab this one and the non-cancer and I'll start with this one. So these guys collect all this data. Thus far, we've been running for a year, collected just over 50 of these cans of air and have done analysis. Those are all 1-hour samples. The van has gone around and collected data, 1-hour period data for 140,000, over 140,000 different hours. Not 140,000 hours this year, but they overlapped. So how do I, as a toxicologist, take all of that information and determine what does that mean for your health risks here in Commerce City? It's a pretty simple process. We know for almost every one of these compounds some level at which they are toxic and not toxic, and both at the short term and over a very long period of time. And people ask, well, why do you look at short term, or you'll hear the word acute, and long term or chronic? You know, why two different risk values for those two time periods? Think about it like this. You know, you can eat candy bars, and you can eat a candy bar, eat 10 of them at one sitting. Your chronic adverse health effect is going to be a nasty gut, right? Or you could eat 2 of them every day for 70 years. You're not going to feel a nasty gut, but if you don't like love handles, you're in trouble. You know, that's the chronic effect. Same candy bar, but one of them is allotted a short period of time, the other is a little bit over a long period of time. So as a toxicologist, that's what I'm looking at. So we look at, we take all these data that we get, and if you go look in the reports on the website for the van, you will see this graphic over all of the different neighborhoods that these guys drive around. And basically what this tells me is this yellow line is the path that the van is driving around. And as it's driving, every 1 second, it's grabbing some air and it's measuring it for 60 plus compounds. All right? What I show here is every one of those 1 seconds. So for the chemical benzene, while they were driving around this area, this is what the van was seeing. All right? And you can't see with the naked eye, but these dots are tiny. Every one of them are 1 second measurements. After 1 hour, this line turns green. That means that this first green dot is the average of all of these orange dots. So that's a 1 hour average. Am I worried as a toxicologist about what people are exposed to for 1 hour? Not really. 24 hours or longer are what I'm worried about. But 1 hour has caught traction with the state of Colorado and other different groups. So that is what we're looking at, is what is people's exposure in these neighborhoods in 1 hour chunks. So as the van continues to drive around the neighborhood, it continues to collect more data, and every one of these dots represents the previous 1 hour. So you can get, after a day of driving around, 10, 20,000 1 hour chunks of information. Yes, ma'am.
So are you talking average here?
These are,
Like it goes from red
these
to,
are, every one of these are 1 second.
and it goes from red to green. And what
Right.
you're seeing
Once it's
is
green,
that
the
that
green
red
is
and-
1 hour average. That's right. So
So
all,
it's an average. Okay.
just the green. Yep. And when you get a close look at these, Trudy, you'll see that the orange is behind the green. So you can see all of the 1 second measurements, but all the green are the 1 hour, the previous 1 hour group together. And so I took those 1 hour averages, and I go and look at, we call them health guidance values. So these are values that have been established by the EPA, by the CDC. Some have been established by Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, and the state of Colorado Public Health Department uses these same values. They are values that have been determined to be safe for acute exposure up to 14 days by everyone, including the very elderly, the very young, people with asthma,